welcome to the COM 498 show. I'm Dr. Tony Palmeri from the Department of Communication Studies at UW Oshkosh. As always, decked out in my New York Yankees regalia. And today it's especially meaningful as we record today. It is official opening day. The Yankees will be playing the Brewers, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Actually, my guest today is a longtime Milwaukee Brewers fan, and he is someone, his name is Brian Borchardt. He graduated way back in 1995, which tells you how old, not just he is, but how old I am too. And when Brian graduated in 95, I remember thinking, he's got so much personality. He's one of the most engaging people you'll ever meet. I thought Brian is going to do fine no matter what he decides to do. And I got to say, Brian, and I mean this with all sincerity, you over the years have become a great man. I mean, you meet my definition of that.
Well, thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. That's
well, I appreciate you. And when you left, I'll have you tell the story, but when you left college, you thought you wanted to be like a multimillionaire sales guy. And you were successful in sales. And then you got into teaching. We'll get to that. But why don't you start off by telling us, where's Brian Borchardt originally from?
You bet.
What led you to UW Oshkosh, and then what led you to be a comm studies major?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Milwaukee, graduated from Pius High School, and I really didn't understand. My mom and dad both were not college graduates. Well, my dad had an associate's degree. And so there wasn't a lot of prep for the transition I was about to embark on. And my brother had graduated 2 years prior, and he had a friend that went to UW Oshkosh. And he said it was a great party school. And literally I mean, it's sadly, but I knew it was close, far enough away. But I got to Oshkosh, and I was a psych major to start because I had a really cool psychology teacher senior year. So of course I wanted to be a psych major. And again, not understanding what all entailed in that. But I went to Oshkosh and ended up on campus, and my eyes began to open up. Came from a pretty conservative household, and I probably still have some of that roots inside of me, but having a college campus opened my mind to a lot of things that maybe I wasn't exposed to. And so in doing that, I also really started to think about what I want to do and what I wanted to be. And truly my thought was I wanted to go, Milwaukee or bigger and get into sales. My dad and my brother were looking to get into, my dad was in sales. My brother was looking to get into sales. And I just knew I could make a lot of money, and that was going to bring me happiness. I was sure of it. And I did. I got out of school. I sold insurance door to door. That was not a good idea, but I learned a lot from that. I worked at a company called J.J. Keller and Associates, and then New London Engineering. And that was the turning point, really. There's a couple turning points in my life, but I think that one was major, the one that put me on this path. But
what got you to change from psychology to comm studies?
I think I just realized that I did well. First off, it wasn't as interesting to me as I thought a little bit about what would be like a lot more science involved and a lot of those things. I did think about business, and then realized I had to get through accounting, which was kind of the filtering class. And I was always like, all right, I know I can communicate. I'm intrigued by just playing. I guess I was playing to my strengths a little bit. And truly, once I started to get into your classes and Lori Carroll's and Joe Jemmons, those are the people that kind of made this like, wait a second, something I do pretty well already, I can now hone my craft. And I used it several times in interviews. I'm like, people would ask me, why aren't you a business major? And I would always tell them, well, you're going to probably teach me your business, but probably one of the number one issues that companies face is communication breakdown, and I've got that nailed. So
now, right. And you mentioned some of the jobs that you got, immediately after graduation. Mm-hmm. And I know that at one point, and I've heard you tell the story, at one point you got laid off from a position.
Oh, well, it was fired.
Yeah, you were fired. I use the euphemism.
Right.
And that became a transformative moment for you. Tell us what happened when you got fired from your job.
Yeah, thanks. It's still too soon. No, I I actually want to. So the gentleman that owned the company, New London Engineering, I had transferred over there from JJ Keller. I was traveling throughout the Northeast and throughout Canada. I had a great expense account. I was making tons of money. I think I spent like $3,000 on a dinner after closing a sale. I mean, it was like this was where I was kind of like, yeah. But there was something missing, and I just started feeling it. I was starting to kind of, my mind was wandering. I was not like, I wasn't in love with selling conveyors, like to people that really didn't necessarily need conveyors, but I had to convince them. And I kept on in the back of my mind thinking I want to go back to school and become a teacher. And Lori, my wife at the time, and she was also a comm student, we met at Oshkosh. We had, just passing by talking about it. And I just remember Marty coming, or my boss, came in and said, "Hey, Marty needs your credit card and your keys. We're going to let you go." And I'm like, what? Like a shock. Like I was producing and I was so mad. I was angry. And I'm on the way home and I'm on my cell phone and I'm like, I'm crying. I'm like, Lori, what the hell's going on? I got fired. And she was just calm. She's like, well, then go back to school and be a teacher, and that's what
Wow.
you've always wanted to do. And it was like all of a sudden this big cloud was lifted. And, sometimes in your life you need those mentors, you need those people that can cut through the haze and things. And I think for me in that situation, Lori it still was troublesome and frustrated. Like I was mad. I wanted to tell him off. And now at this point, I use him as an inspiration in a talk I give for a lot of students and places I speak at. Um, I want to thank him. So, because it
Well,
really.
I was inspired. I remember back then you had contacted me and said, I'm thinking about getting into teaching. I'm coming back for a certificate. And I remember just feeling overjoyed because I thought, wow, this guy has exactly the kind of characteristics that will succeed in a classroom. Uh, and I know you were aiming toward K through 12, which is where you did
Mhm.
do your teaching. And correct me if I'm wrong, but in your first teaching job was at Xavier High School,
It
the
was.
Catholic school in Appleton,
Yep.
and you won the Teacher of the Year in your first year of teaching.
Yeah, it kind of validated all the effort and time I put into it. And
Wow.
I'm not necessarily, it's interesting. Everyone kind of, oh, I didn't really expect it, or I don't. Those things, those are benefits, right? When you get, recognized or you get awarded something because you realize your peers and other people around you notice that, you've done some good things. And for me, that was like almost like, okay, it was a sign that said, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is the path I'm supposed to be on. Had I not got that award, I know I'd still be doing it, but it was just it was almost like a sign or a validation that was okay, keep on the path. So it was
And
cool.
I know that schools like Xavier are not the highest paying gigs, but you at that time, those first couple of years of teaching, you were really getting a tremendous amount of joy out of it, right? I mean, hadn't you come to the conclusion that I have really found my place?
It was. In fact, ironically, kind of a side note, I taught a class when I first got there. It was called Cultural Diversity. And I thought, okay, really interesting. And I looked at it, it was the Japanese culture, the African culture. And I'm like, oh my God, these kids. And thankful because the things that I learned, not only the first time around at Oshkosh, but also with Marguerite Pennick and some of the things she taught in my grad classes and stuff that I was going when I was back in the education program. I revamped that class and I had talked about some of the major issues that we were dealing with in Appleton in the Fox Valley about what it's like to be an African American or Native American or Hispanic or Hmong or even a gay Catholic. I mean, believe that, we had speakers come in and
Right?
talk. And it was a moment there where you're like, okay, I understand this. And ironically, when the world was kind of going crazy over COVID and things, I reached out back to my students and had them fill out a survey about what they remembered from that class. And I got some tremendous feedback that even validated even more that what we were doing at that time, we're pushing the envelope because it's what kids needed. They didn't necessarily need to know where every country in Africa was. They needed to know what was happening in their backyard. And
Oh my goodness. Yes.
so
Exactly right. Now, actually, one thing to show you how teachers never stop learning from their students. You probably don't remember this, Brian, but I came to visit you at Xavier, and I don't remember if I guest taught or I was watching you teach, but you remember when you were a student of mine, I was always using the blackboard or using these like horrible overheads. I was like resisting the movement toward PowerPoint.
right?
You taught me how to use PowerPoint.
That's for your music class,
It
your
was
rock class.
Brian Borchardt who taught me how to use PowerPoint. And now I can't imagine ever teaching without that or Google Slides. And
It's
it's because you took the time to teach the teacher, and I will always appreciate that.
yeah,
How did you get from Xavier to go
hold,
ahead?
hold, hold that thought, Tony. Really, I have to commend you for a second here, and that you could have easily just continued to do it what a lot of professors do, is pull out your notes and just lecture. But you were always, and I think that's what made you so popular with a lot of students, is that you really pushed the envelope and you were cutting edge. You were like, look, how can I get better? How can I get to reach the students more? You just talk about your online classes. Like there are professors that fade away and you just keep reinventing yourself. And I think that's why you and your department are so successful. So I think that that mindset has helped quite a bit for you. So I didn't want to interrupt, but I just think you
No,
need.
I appreciate that so much, Brian. And of course, people like you are the best symbol of what we've been doing in this program over many years. But how did you get from Xavier Catholic School, very, a very high quality Catholic school, by the way? How did you get from there to Neenah High School, a public high school?
Yeah, I've learned in my life now that, you can control the controllables and be ready for change because it happens. And my wife and I found out we were having twins.
Wow.
And we had a 3-year-old daughter at the time, Maddie. And like you mentioned, Catholic school and daycare with 3 kids in. It was like we had to make a choice. And so I'm riding this high, I'm ready to go. And all of a sudden it's like life makes a change for you. And so I decided that it made sense for me to be a stay-at-home dad for 4 years with my kids. And to this day is the best opportunity, the best 4 years of my life. At the time, maybe not always because I'm driving me crazy. Lori would get home and I'd be like, here's the kids. And, I would go, take some time for myself. But so I spent 4 years with my family, and after that, it was time to get back into teaching again. And I knocked on a door of a friend, and got next thing you know, I was teaching middle school at Shattuck Middle School in Neenah. Taught social
Hmm.
studies there for 2 years. Ironically, though, my job was cut for 3 years in a row because of the union that existed. First one in or last one in, first one out kind of mentality, which was frustrating. I certainly wasn't the worst social studies teacher there or the best for that matter, but that was just what happened. But I remained optimistic and continued. Every time my principal came down and said, "Sorry, Brian, this is what we have to do." I said, "Well, you got me. I'm going to give you my all, and I understand you'll figure out something." And they always found a position for me. But I think at that point too, I said, all right, I've got to be able to control things I can. So I got on the union and started to negotiate contracts.
Oh,
And then I
wow.
realized, okay, I stepped away from the table on the third time and realized that I just negotiated myself out of a contract again. But that was like, all right, if I can't, I got to take ownership of my actions. And so what am I doing to help and benefit not only me but education. So I got involved, and that's kind of started that mantra of serving and helping.
For you. That's great.
Yeah.
So once you finally did get to Neenah, the high school,
Mhm.
I know that one thing that you have become, very well known for there, it's almost like the Brian Borchardt brand, is to take students literally around the world.
Yeah.
And how many countries have you been to at this point?
At the end of the summer, have been at 33 countries. We started a program called Neenah Without Borders. Some kids in my launch program came to me and said, we really want to do something more and give back to the community. And I said, all right. And so our first trip was to the Dominican Republic, doing a service trip. And it was such a success that the program started to catch up. And we did Peru, we've been to Ecuador, we've been to China. I've been taking students to Japan. We were just in Thailand last summer. This summer, we're going back to Peru with students. So So much of who I am has really been about one, giving students the ability to find their role and become the best versions of themselves.
Mhm.
And but also make them realize that the world's a really big place. Neenah's a small, small town. And if you don't take a look around a little bit, it's easy to kind of get caught up here and your whole world becomes just this small area. But taking kids to places like Machu Picchu or to have them see that maybe their lives are not as bad as sometimes they see. Um, it's a pretty cool aha moment as a teacher. You know, Tony, I imagine you want kids coming out of your classroom skipping, be like, "Ugh, that lesson Palmeri taught me was amazing." The reality of it doesn't always happen. But on these trips, when you see these kids, there's aha moments that happen, by the minute, where they're just like, this is amazing. And so many of the students I've taken on these trips have then now also found careers in travel or have like really put an emphasis on serving others in their community based on of what they experience. So that's my love is seeing that ripple effect of doing those service needs. That's why we do the things we do.
Could the 21-year-old Brian Borchardt in 1995 have predicted going to Machu Picchu someday with a group of high school juniors and seniors?
No, it's interesting you say that, Tony. I really honestly think about another point in my life is I had a choice back in the day when I was in a fraternity, we had a choice to go down to Daytona Beach on a spring break getaway, do all the things that college students do on that, or I had a choice to go to Kentucky and do a service trip and build houses down there or repair houses and whatnot. And for the life of me, I have no idea why I chose to go to Kentucky.
I
In fact,
remember that.
yeah, and I thought that is just crazy to think, who I was then. I didn't realize the profound impact that having that one trip would have on me and how I look at life. I'm a huge, big servant leader, and I've done enough in my life where I don't need the accolades or the awards. Those have come, and now I do appreciate those. But now I see and take great joy in seeing how I can serve others and then see how that impacts them going forward. I can't help. I give a talk called The Compound Interest of Service. It's the more we start to serve others in our lives, the greater and richer our lives become down the road. And it's like that whole idea if you save $100 and every week or whatever, they become a millionaire when you want to retire. I just think if people started to serve others and looked out for each other, then we become this kind of way of serving each other, and we wouldn't have to stress out as much about the external things that come flying at us because others are trying to help us.
Brian, I'm getting emotional listening to you talk about this because I'd like to think that every moment of my teaching career has been dedicated to helping students become what you just said. And to watch you do it in your life and articulate it so beautifully like you just did, that's just incredible. That's just incredible. Do you have hope for the future of this country in terms of education? I mean, I know that's a big question, but when you look at what's going on in our K through 12 and our universities, are you hopeful going forward? It looks like we've got crisis all around.
It does, and when it comes down to it, Tony, and I think you were best at this, and I think a lot of the professors that were in that comm department, it's really not about you know communication. It's not about math. It's about building relationships and learning skills as we go through because those are truly the transferable skills. Like, I'll be honest, I mean, I remember the classes because we've talked quite a bit about them. I remember the concept and these ideas, but what I remember the most, and hence have been friends for so long, it's our relationships and that kind of stuff.
Right.
I've always thought about our relationship and a few other teachers and professors I've had is I want to be that person for my students as well. And I know that there are kids that are not going to graduate that I have in my classroom. I know that there are issues that we're going to run into that are going to be insurmountable because of just the factors are in there. I think sometimes all we have is hope, Tony, because I
Yeah.
think the messages that we're getting, in our world are bombarding us so fast, and the news cycle is so fast that like we don't ever really get a chance to pause and really fix things. It's always something else is happening. And it's easy to say the toothpaste is out of the tube and we're never going to go back to the way it was. I just can't believe I would ever stop trying. administratively, we butt our heads because of funding and do all these things. But as long as I have a door on my room and I can impact those students right there and then, and of course, yeah, I've got hope. I've got hope for all those kids, and
And today you are in what's called an alternative education program.
yeah, yep,
Describe that. What is
yep.
that?
And I don't like the term as much because it connotates something negative, and
Right, right.
you're at risk of not graduating based on their situation or their standing or credits or whatever. But really, what it is just repackaging curriculum, helping kids. Well, first and foremost, always building that relationships because some of the kids I deal with have had some, severe trauma for various things, and or they have a crappy home life for, whatever. But my goal is to make sure that if I take what they're learning, repackage it in a way that makes them get it or understand it, or at least, not only academically, but just, sometimes emotionally or help them socially. I'm kind of like a coach or like a parent at school, if you will. All my students have my phone number. No one's ever really bothered to, use it in a negative way or anything. In fact, I would argue that have used it in times of great need where I've been able to help them. So it's definitely a unique position. Most schools have it. We have, our socioeconomic status in our school has changed greatly since I've been here. I mean, I think we're 15% free and reduced lunch when I started, and we're now at about 35%, which means or usually means is that the students that we have probably don't have access to a lot of the things that maybe someone maybe more affluent do and things, and so we have to fill those gaps in. And so that's been a struggle with funding and those types of things because we need some things, but it's the good fight that we just keep on trying to make sure these kids graduate from high school with a plan, and that's kind of has been
Yes.
the emphasis of what we try to do in the program.
Yes. Well, another thing that I admire about you, Brian, is you've become really a community activist. And I know that for many years you were involved with the what was the brigade
Yep.
called?
Yeah, the Boys and Girls Brigade.
The
Yeah.
Boys and Girls Brigade that you did for many years. What was that all about?
Yeah, my wife Lori was involved from a young girl through this program. It's a youth program that I always kind of say it's kind of a cross between the Boys and Girls Club, a leadership program, the Boy Scouts, and it's a Christian-based organization that really tries to develop leaders, and it's been around for 125 years. I needed something to fill the gaps when I was in sales. Like I was felt like I was making, doing all these things, and then all of a sudden I'm like, well, I'm gonna go volunteer because I want to work out, help kids and help the community. So that's where,
Right.
I've been volunteering for 30 years there now, and it's been awesome. It's been a great group. We have a leadership camp we've done. You came up to visit and talk to that group.
Yeah, you invited me twice, and it was
Yeah.
really inspiring both times. Especially watching people like you and Lori, your spouse, and others, like the work that you do. It's just like so admirable, and it's so important for those kids.
Yeah, that's and the impact that that organization has had on our community through adults and kids today. It's infectious, and you want to be a part of it. And you see that that's the good stuff. It's easy to dwell on all the negative things, and it's.
Right.
I've been really kind of going through a lot of conversations with people and my friends in my age of just like how do we tune out social media? How do we turn off the stupid news channel, well, not news channels, the propaganda channels, those types of things that just are so frustrating. If you turn those things off and you realize there's a lot of good in the world and we're a lot more alike than we are different.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So
And then earlier this decade, I believe, you decided to run for the Neenah City Council. What year was that you first ran?
I want to say 2019 it was. I think we
Was
were
it
in the
19? Okay.
yeah, we were in
And
the
you
middle.
won.
Well, yeah, that was an interesting, teaching civics and being at the core of what my education was and what I loved teaching the most at the time. I always told kids get involved. I did like an activism project, and really kids got out in the community. And we know, Tony, that your impact is felt most greatly at the local level. And we want to believe that Donald Trump is ruining our world or Joe Biden is ruining our world. The reality of it is our local officials are the ones that, kind of make things happen and impact us mostly directly. And so my students, kind of always challenged me to, do things and I love that kind of give and take. And so I thought, well, I kind of told everyone to get involved. Why don't I do that? And so there was an open seat, and it was a Zoom call, much like this, where all eight other candidates had to share their speech about why they wanted to fill this role or this position. Went through a bunch of different ties, and next thing you know, I won, and I was drinking through a fire hose with all the information coming at me, like, holy smokes, but I loved it. It kind of not only filled that need to serve, but also that I wanted to learn and continue to grow and get better. And it's been awesome. So I've been on council for, ever since then.
Yeah.
I did took a stab at running for mayor, which was unfortunately I needed about 765 more friends to vote. Um, but I'm a big
Let me
believer.
let me tell let me
Yeah.
tell a little story about when you ran for mayor. When you were running for mayor, I happened to be in Neenah for something. It was a big event. I think it was for my Lori when she was running for an office, and I was building up your campaign with these people I'm talking to, and some elderly woman says to me, I just don't trust Borchardt. And I said, and I tried to be very polite. I said, let me tell you something. If I was in trouble somewhere and I was only allowed one phone call and my wife was not available, I'd call Brian Borchardt because I know he'd get the wheels moving for me. Right? And she
Yeah.
looked at me like shocked. But
Well,
I believe that, Brian, you are the kind of guy that you go to the mat for people.
yeah, why not, right? I mean,
Right.
why not do that for people? And I don't know. And I don't know. I think that that's just kind of, I guess it's always been in my fiber. My dad was like that, kind of give the shirt off your back kind of guy. And I don't know. I just think our world's better when we treat each other like that, we always call it our O'Hare friends. It's like, all right, I'm stuck in O'Hare. Who's going to drive the 3 hours down to Chicago to pick me up? You all know, everyone right now is thinking of somebody in their mind that would be able to do that. And Lori and I also have always kind of portrayed ourselves as connectors. Like, if I've said it once, I've said it 100 times. I'm like, I got a guy. Not in like the Italian way, but I got a guy. But I just building relationships with people and doing things for others, I think people trust and want to be a part of your life. And then there's a time in your life too, you got to shed those people that aren't making you better. I tell my students all the time, you become like the people you hang out with most. And those are the friends and people that you surround yourself with. And I've had to over the years shed people that weren't helping me or making me better. And as I'm 50, 52. I've had a great 50 years of my life. I can't wait for what the next 50 years are going to bring.
Yeah.
Instead of saying I can't wait to retire, I, I mean, I'm never going to retire. I'm going to always do something, you
Right.
know. And I'm reading a book called Strength to Strengths, and it's about finding that happiness and joy in the second half of your life. And I think that's so important to kind of really reflect and take some time to find out where you are, where's your positioning in this world, and where do you want to be? And if you're
Right.
not, don't get angry because you're in a situation that you've put yourself into. Make that
Right. Exactly.
so. But
Well,
it's
Brian,
fun, but
thank you so much for taking the time to do this. If my current students want to reach out to you, I'm sure you'd be happy to get emails or phone calls, wouldn't you?
absolutely, yeah, and anything, yeah, that's just kind of my nature. So if I could be of assistance or help, or there are people looking to do something, or I don't know, if something I said inspired or kind of had people questioning or wondering about something, I'd be happy to have a chat about it. Be great.
Well, inspired me as always. So thanks so much, Brian. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it.
Yep.